Welcome to the Wife Stories YouTube channel. New video every day, and don't forget to subscribe. Here we go.
Ona smilas. It was a sound that once felt like the warmth of a sunrise, the kind of laughter that reached me in a place deeper than words. But that night, it struck me as hollow, an echo bouncing inside the walls of our home, a home we'd once dreamed of filling with laughter of a different kind. I stood there in the half-lit hallway, leaning against the doorframe, almost paralyzed by the contrast, her bright, carefree giggle, and my own heaviness. It was as if I were standing before a casket, except the casket held our love, already cold to the touch. I let the moment stretch. She hadn't noticed me yet. She was on the phone, the glow of the screen lighting up her face, reflecting in those warm brown eyes that used to make me feel special. Tonight, they looked distant. I could see her lips curl in a smile, the corners turning up in a practiced, deliberate way. And through the hush of the house, I heard the tail end of her conversation, a low murmur that ended in a sweet, hushed tone I'd almost forgotten she was capable of. My pulse kicked. There was no reason for her to be that gentle, that affectionate, at this time of night. Not with me standing there in the dark. When she finally hung up, she must have sensed another presence. Her head jerked up. The laughter stopped. She faced me, her face going blank like she was in the final moment of a performance, and realized the audience had caught a slip in her act. We stood in silence. My ears pounded with the sudden rush of blood, anger, betrayal, confusion, and, worst of all, that aching loneliness that had grown like a tumor in our marriage. I pushed off the doorframe, walked straight past her, and headed for the bedroom. That was when I noticed her phone, just left there on the corner table, the screen still unlocked. My heart was hammering, but I managed to keep my voice low when I said, "Whose message was so funny?" She pressed her lips together. "Just a friend," she mumbled, though her tone reeked of guilt, and yet she tried to layer it with a casualness that made my stomach turn. It wasn't that she was lying. That alone was terrible. It was that she assumed I'd just accept the lie, as if my own eyes and ears meant nothing. I shook my head, not even trusting myself to speak. I stepped into the bedroom and closed the door behind me with a click that seemed to reverberate through my chest. The click of finality. The click of a coffin's lid shutting. I tried to breathe, tried to make sense of the swirling tension in my mind. Outside, the steady hum of the traffic reminded me that life went on all around us, oblivious to what was unraveling here. Minutes later, she opened the door. We had never really established a boundary where one of us could lock the other out. This had always been our shared space. She walked in without an apology, wearing an expression I couldn't read. Part shame, part defiance. I said nothing, just watched her movements in the dimness. She stood near the foot of the bed, arms folded tightly across her chest. Then, in a voice that tried too hard to be mild, she said, "Why do you look at me like that?" "How else am I supposed to look at you?" I asked, biting off each word. I wanted to rattle her, but something deeper in me, something bruised, wanted her to tell me it was all in my head, that there was no other man, no betrayal, that our biggest issue was the emptiness that had been building for years, but not this searing humiliation. Part of me wanted to be lied to one more time, just so I wouldn't have to face the truth. She took a step forward. "Mike," she said. Her voice had a quiver to it. "It's not what you think." I let out a bitter laugh. "Then tell me what it is, because it certainly looks like I'm not the one you're sharing that kind of warmth with anymore." I forced my gaze away, afraid of what I might see in her eyes. Guilt, pity, or, worse, indifference. She tried to speak again, but nothing came out. She just stood there. And I realized at that moment that, in a way, this confrontation was pointless. I knew, and she knew I knew. The phone, the hushed giggles, the distance that had grown like a cancer in our marriage. Every sign was there, but I pretended not to see. Until now. I remembered a moment from earlier that night. I was in the kitchen when her phone had buzzed. She was in the shower. Something about the way the phone lit up, partially hidden by a pillow on the couch, had caught my attention. I don't usually snoop. I've always believed in privacy. But the buzz came again. And again. A small voice in my mind whispered, "Something's off." So I picked it up. Just to see. Just to calm my nerves. Instead, I stumbled onto a message that punched me in the gut. Asterisk, I miss you even when you're right next to him. We'll find a way to see each other again. Asterisk. And it was signed, asterisk, Tony. Asterisk, I'll never forget the rush of heat in my face when I read those words, the feeling that the floor beneath me was suddenly unstable. I recognized the name. Tony was a new friend she'd mentioned once or twice in passing. Someone from work, though she no longer had a day job. We'd never argued about him. I just let it pass because I thought, let her have friends, let her have a social circle, let her be free. That's what I told myself. But the pit in my stomach told me otherwise. She'd come out of the shower then, hair wrapped in a towel, and I had shoved the phone back onto the couch, face down, like a child caught stealing. We pretended everything was normal. She'd walked into the kitchen, gave me a peck on the cheek, and mumbled something about leftover pasta for dinner. I nodded, my heart pounding, waiting for the right moment to say something. But I didn't say anything. I watched her walk away, feeling a knot in my throat that I couldn't swallow. Now, hours later, she stood in front of me, wearing a robe that only partially concealed the body I'd once adored. I stared at her, with a mixture of longing and disgust. I tried to recall the last time I had touched her intimately, or the last time she had looked at me with genuine desire. It felt like a distant memory, some half-forgotten dream. She reached out and placed a hand on my forearm. "Mike, we've been drifting apart for so long," she began. I didn't know how to fix it. Tony. He was just there. He made me feel seen. Her voice trembled on that last word. Seen. As if my eyes had been closed all this time. Rage and heartbreak flared up in me, wrestling each other for control. Seen. I wanted to shout at her that I had always seen her. That all my hard work, all those hours poured into my business, were for asterisk, to secure the life she once said she dreamed of. And maybe that had been my mistake. I thought providing was how I showed my love. But maybe all she saw was a man who'd chosen his career over her. I bit down the urge to vent everything at once. Instead, I let out a long, shaky breath and said, "Do you love him?" She tensed, her face twisted, and for a split second, I saw raw fear in her eyes. "No," she murmured. "It's not love. But it feels good. I can't explain it." A cynical laugh escaped me. "Feels good," I repeated. "And what exactly do you think it's doing to me? Do you realize how?" I couldn't finish. My throat felt as if someone had thrust a fist down it. She made a move to hold me. I took a small step back and stared at her in disbelief. "Don't," I warned. "Don't touch me right now." Her hands dropped to her sides, and tears started gathering in her eyes. The woman I'd married, the one who used to talk about building a beautiful life, was now standing there, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. And yet all I could feel was that numb, bottomless ache inside my chest, like my heart was being extracted piece by piece. I sat on the edge of the bed, letting my elbows rest on my knees, staring at the floor. Images flooded my mind. Images of her locked in Tony's arms, her face alight with passion, maybe letting out that laughter that once belonged to me. My jaw clenched. The more I imagined it, the more real it became. My temples throbbed with an almost violent energy. I wanted to break something, but I also wanted to crawl into a hole and never come out again. She whispered my name, but it sounded far away. I was lost in that swirl of fantasy and jealousy, picturing them in a moment of intimate entanglement. My stomach turned, and I felt nauseous, not just from anger, but from the acute sense of betrayal. The sense that I'd lost something that could never be replaced. I closed my eyes. Why? I managed. Was it just the thrill? Or was I not enough? She didn't respond, and that silence was louder than anything she could have said. Eventually, I lay back on the bed, still fully clothed, feet on the floor, as if I were too exhausted to adjust. She stood there for a moment longer, then quietly left. The door remained open, letting a sliver of hallway light spill onto the carpet. I stared at that ribbon of light until it blurred in my vision, and my chest felt so heavy I could hardly breathe. When I finally fell asleep, I dreamed of her laughter and woke up with tears dried on my cheeks. The phone was on my bedside table. Hers, not mine. She must have left it there by accident. Something about the way it was angled, face up, unlocked, told me it was no accident. Maybe she wanted me to look to see more. Maybe this was her version of honesty, ironically done through a digital device. My hand trembled as I picked it up. The message glowed on the screen. Asterisk, you're the best thing that's happened to me this year. Miss our last time. Can't wait to feel you close again. Asterisk, I felt bile rise in my throat. Asterisk, last time. Asterisk, the words seared themselves into my memory. They'd been physically close. This wasn't just flirting or an emotional affair. It was real, tangible, had a texture and taste. My mind flashed to them entangled on a bed, maybe even our bed. Her nails on his back, that low laughter in his ear. I tried to swallow the lump in my throat. And that was when I realized I was no longer just hurt. I was furious. The kind of fury that tightens your scalp and forces your eyes wide open. I rose from the bed abruptly, marched into the living room. There she was, curled up on the couch, hugging a pillow to her chest. Her eyes were red, puffy with tears. I tossed the phone onto the coffee table with a soft thud. She flinched as if it were a grenade. "Look," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, the words carrying all the tension inside me. "I'm not going to stand here and yell. I just want to hear it from you. Tell me how long this has been going on. Don't force me to drag it out of you." She swallowed. "It started a few months ago," she said in a small voice. "We met at a design event. He was charming. And I felt lonely. I guess I wanted to feel alive again." My lip curled. Asterisk alive. Asterisk, I thought. Another word that implied I was dead to her. "So," I muttered, letting out a slow exhale, "you wanted to feel alive. So you started meeting him, sleeping with him, lying to me, letting me finance your entire life while you—" I broke off, my voice trembling. "Am I just an ATM to you?" She looked up, tears streaming. "No, Mike, it's not like that. You were always so busy, so focused on your company, your success. I tried to tell you how lonely I was, but you never listened. Or maybe I never said it the right way, I don't know." I cut her off. "You're blaming me. You think I wanted a loveless marriage. I was building something for us. Everything I did for you and for our future." My voice cracked on that last word. Future. A future that now seemed like an illusion. She didn't answer, just gazed at me with despair in her eyes. I felt my stomach twist. Part of me wanted to comfort her. Old habits die hard. But I clenched my fists instead. "How many times?" I asked abruptly. She hesitated, looking away. That was answer enough. I don't remember," she finally whispered. Her words sank in. She didn't even remember the exact count. My breath caught. It was like a kick to the gut. This wasn't some quick, one-night mistake. This was repeated, chosen again and again. They'd spent nights together, maybe in seedy motels or in his place. Maybe in broad daylight, laughing about how clueless I was. My gaze hardened. She saw the shift in me. I said, "I'm going to take a walk. I need space." Without waiting for her response, I grabbed my jacket from the stand. In that moment, all I wanted was to get out of there before I said something I couldn't take back, or did something I'd regret. I stepped out the front door and let it close behind me. The soft click echoed in my mind, just like the night before, but this time it was me shutting her out. Standing on the porch, I inhaled the cool night air. It smelled of damp grass and faint car exhaust. The sound of distant traffic hummed around me. I thought of how many times I'd come home late from the office, worried about a project or an investment deal, and how many times I glimpsed her silhouette through the window and felt relief, comfort. Now I wondered if on those nights she'd already been sharing her silhouette with someone else. I took a few steps into the yard, half expecting her to follow. She didn't. Perhaps it was better that way. I walked down the block, my mind a roiling storm of images. It was painfully clear that the foundation of our marriage had cracked, maybe beyond repair. In the distance, a stray car rumbled by. A dog barked somewhere. The world was so indifferent to my agony. That's the cruelty of heartbreak. It feels like your entire universe is imploding, yet everything outside continues like it always did. When I returned, the house was quiet. She was in the bedroom again, I presumed. I considered sleeping on the couch, but ultimately decided to go inside and lie on the bed. I didn't say a word to her when I slipped between the sheets, though the tension in the air was palpable. Eventually, exhaustion claimed me. Sometime in the early hours of morning, her phone buzzed again. I jolted awake, feeling that now familiar surge of dread. She must have left it on the nightstand. My eyes fell on the lit screen, the glowing text from Tony. Asterisk A. Dreamt about you tonight. I can't wait any longer. Asterisk I closed my eyes, silently cursing. Asterisk can't wait any longer. Asterisk the nerve of this man. Texting her in our home, in our marital bed. My fists clenched. For a moment, I considered writing back a message that would give him a piece of my mind, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Instead, I got up, went to the bathroom, looked at myself in the mirror, half expecting to see a stranger. And in a way, I did. A man with dark circles under his eyes, jaw tight with frustration, eyes filled with a pain I couldn't even name. At some point, the day turned into a haze of checking emails, trying to keep my business afloat, and ignoring the hollow feeling in my chest. She drifted around the house, silent, as if waiting for my permission to speak. I didn't give it to her. I needed time to figure out my next move. Some part of me even considered trying to salvage what was left. We'd invested years together. It felt impossible to throw that away in one swift decision. That evening, I found her phone again on the kitchen counter. Another message from him. This time more explicit, peppered with lines about how he missed the taste of her lips, the warmth of her body. And those lines, so intimately phrased, hit me like a sucker punch. My chest tightened with an almost physical pain. The betrayal took on a new dimension, not just emotional, but deeply physical, like a wound that wouldn't close. She appeared behind me, noticing my reaction to the text. I spun to face her, phone in hand. "He has no shame," I said flatly. "And you don't seem to mind." She opened her mouth, then closed it again, tears welling up. Her breath came in shallow gasps, but I wasn't about to let her off easy. My heart pounded as I stepped closer. "Talk," I demanded quietly. Tell me every detail of what you did with him. I want to hear it from your lips." Her eyes went wide. "Mike, don't do this." I clenched my jaw, a tremor in my voice. "You're going to stand there and pretend you can't find the words. You found them for him, didn't you?" She swallowed hard. "Please, I don't want to hurt you more. It's a bit late for that, don't you think?" My words came out in a low growl. "Hurt me more. Every time I close my eyes, I see his hands on you, hear your laughter, imagine your body arching under his. Do you think there's anything left to salvage? You're already ripping me apart." She broke down then, sobbing into her hands. But my anger had built too far to be undone by tears. My voice stayed low, trembling with pent-up rage. "He texts you. You smile. You hide your phone. You lie to my face. And now you cry. Maybe I want you to cry." Her knees buckled, and she sank to the floor, her sobs muffled by her palms. I let her stay there, watching her with a numb detachment I'd never felt before. This was the woman I had once vowed to love, honor, and cherish. Now all I could see was a liar, a betrayer who had chipped away at the foundation of our marriage one stolen moment at a time. Without another word, I walked to the bedroom, grabbed a duffel bag, and started throwing clothes into it. I had no idea where I planned to go. I just needed out of these suffocating walls, out of this once warm home that now felt like a tomb of broken promises. She followed me, eyes red, tears still clinging to her cheeks. "Mike," she managed, voice hoarse. "Please, don't leave. We can talk this out." I stopped, turned, and fixed her with a hollow stare. "Talk it out. You want to talk now? Now that I'm half crazy with rage and humiliation? Now that I can't look at you without picturing him?" She grabbed the edge of the dresser for support, tears dripping off her chin. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Yeah," I muttered. "Me too." I zipped the bag shut. The sound tore through the silence like a knife. I almost walked out in that moment. But something made me pause, some old sense of responsibility. Instead, I tossed the bag onto the bed and looked her right in the eye. "You want to talk," I said quietly, the words so tightly controlled that my throat felt raw. "Fine. You tell me everything, from the first moment you let him get close to the last time you slept with him. And then, maybe we can talk. But if you try to sugarcoat it, I'll walk out that door and never come back." She closed her eyes, inhaled in a ragged breath, and started talking. Slow at first, stumbling over words, each syllable tasting like poison. She told me about how she met him at a design showcase, how they flirted harmlessly at first, until harmless turned into coffee, coffee turned into drinks, and drinks turned into something she'd be ashamed to say out loud. She shared how lonely she felt, how she convinced herself I wouldn't care or even notice if she had a little fun on the side. And then how it escalated. There were motels, lunch break meetings in his car, hotels when Tony traveled. At least half a dozen times. Maybe more. With each admission, I felt a chunk of my soul tear away, like someone was gutting me from the inside out. She avoided my gaze. I stared at her, taking in every detail. The shape of her lips, the slight quiver in her shoulders, the lines of sorrow on her face. And I felt no pity. Only a chasm that stretched between us, where love used to live. When she finished, we stood in silence. I realized my fists had clenched so tightly that my nails cut into my palms. Blood beaded up in crescent shapes. I exhaled, forcing my hands to relax. She looked at me, eyes hollow. "I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness, but I don't want to lose you." A strangled laugh escaped me. "Lose me? You lost me the minute you decided you'd rather sleep with him than fight for us." I felt tears threaten to rise. I choked them back. I refused to cry in front of her. Not now. She made a small, desperate movement toward me, arms open. "Mike," she pleaded, maybe we can fix this. Go to counseling. Something." I stared at her arms, at the memory of holding her. "You think I can just pretend this never happened?" I murmured. "I used to see you as my wife. Now I look at you, and all I see is a stranger who shares my address." She took a step back, lowering her arms. The grief on her face was genuine, but it came too late. My mind raced, flashes of him touching her welcoming it. A fresh wave of nausea hit me. "Where is he now?" I demanded suddenly. She hesitated, then said, He has a place downtown. But I don't see him anymore. Not since." She trailed off. I told him I needed to stop, that it was killing me inside. I scoffed. "Killing you? Good to know you still have a conscience." My voice was nearly shaking from suppressed rage. The mental picture of her in that man's bed replayed like a stuck record in my head. She took a breath, then tried again. "Maybe we can go away somewhere. Try to reconnect. You and me. Just Leave everything behind for a while. Talk this through. Please. I stared at her for a long moment. Part of me wanted to give in, to cling to the faint hope of saving our marriage. But the other part, the part that felt shattered, was screaming that I could never trust her again. Finally, I said, I need to think. Alone. I grabbed my duffel bag and brushed past her, ignoring the way she trembled. At the door, I stopped, turning just enough to see her over my shoulder. If you value your life, then you'll accept what's coming, I said in a low voice, each word tinged with a fury I could hardly contain. And don't you dare try to intervene. I didn't wait for her reaction. I walked out. The night air was cold on my face as I climbed into my car. I started the engine, pulled out of the driveway, and headed nowhere in particular. The headlights carved tunnels into the dark. My mind churned. I saw her face, and behind it, the image of him with her. They might as well have been burned into my retina. Eventually, I drove to my office building. It was late, the parking lot nearly empty. This place, ironically, had become my refuge. The smell of coffee and the hum of computers in the background had always been constants, more reliable than my personal life these last few years. I used my keycard to let myself in, found my private office, and slumped into the leather chair. I stared at my reflection in the dark computer screen. She cheated because she felt lonely, I muttered bitterly to the emptiness, and I was too blind to see it. I bowed my head, pressing the heels of my palms against my eyes until stars formed behind my eyelids. I tried to hold back tears, tried to keep that stoic composure, but it was no use. My shoulders trembled as a wave of raw emotion crashed down on me. Heartbreak, betrayal, confusion, anger, an entire storm swirling inside my chest. When I finally looked up, the red digits of the clock told me it was almost 2:00 a.m. My desk lamp cast a faint halo of light on the scattered papers. The memory of her voice, her pleas, her tears, it all felt unreal, like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. I knew I had to talk to a lawyer, or at least consider the reality of separation. But I also knew I wasn't ready for that step yet. My mind was too jumbled. A part of me still refused to believe she was gone. Another part of me wanted to make her pay for every single moment of anguish. I ended up crashing on the office couch, drifting in and out of troubled sleep. By morning, I felt stiff and unrested, but the clarity of daylight helped me decide my next move. For too long, I'd let her have the upper hand by pretending everything was fine. Now it was time to show her what real distance felt like. I returned home mid-morning. She was in the kitchen, her eyes puffy, her hair disheveled. She turned when I entered, looking as if she wanted to run to me and beg for another chance. I simply held up a hand. "Don't," I said. I walked past her, grabbed a couple more changes of clothes from the closet, and shoved them into my duffel. She shadowed me in the hallway, tears welling up again. "Where are you going?" "Out," I replied curtly. "And I don't know when I'll be back. If I'll be back." Then, in a calmer tone, I said, "I'll pay the bills. You won't be on the street, but don't expect anything else from me right now." She pressed her lips together, trembling. "Mike, you can't just leave everything behind like this." I let out a humorless laugh. "Watch me." I walked out again, chest tight, but also feeling a flicker of grim satisfaction. She'd wanted me to pay attention. Now she had it, but not in the way she hoped. As I drove off, I tried not to think about the day we got married, how radiant she looked, how I believed we were beginning a lifelong adventure. All that felt like a cruel joke now. For a few days, I kept my distance. I rented a small apartment downtown, near my company's offices, telling my employees I just needed some personal space. Technically true. During those days, I hardly slept, and my appetite was gone. But I poured myself into work, securing new clients, finalizing an important partnership. Oddly enough, I found a twisted sense of purpose there, the unstoppable desire to succeed, to prove something not just to her but to myself. If I was going to lose the most intimate relationship of my life, I sure as hell wouldn't lose everything else. Then, one evening, something happened that changed my perspective. I was in the new apartment, leaning over a laptop, reviewing spreadsheets, when a message popped up from a mutual friend. It was a rumor that my wife had been seen in public with Tony, holding hands at a late-night cafe. My chest flooded with raw fury. She was already out with him again, while I was here trying to pick up the pieces. My head pounded. Seconds later, my phone buzzed. It was her calling. I stared at the screen, letting it ring and ring. Finally, I answered. "Mike." Her voice sounded small. "We need to talk." I clenched my jaw. "You're with him right now." "No," she said, a slight tremor in her voice. "We're done, I swear. I can't live like this anymore, with you gone, and everything so unsettled. Please, can we meet somewhere neutral, just for a conversation?" 1,000 retorts flashed in my mind, but I decided to say yes. Part of me wanted to see her face, see if she gained any new sense of remorse or clarity. We agreed to meet at a quiet coffee shop on the outskirts of town the next afternoon. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting at a corner table, a half-empty cup of tea in front of her. She looked smaller, as though she had physically shrunk. Her eyes darted up when she saw me, and I read a flicker of hope in them, which only made me want to keep my guard even higher. I took a seat across from her, folding my hands on the table. "Talk," I said bluntly. She inhaled. "I was wrong to see Tony. After you left, I felt abandoned, and I fell back into something comfortable. But it didn't feel right. I ended it. For good this time." A burning sensation flared behind my eyes. Ended it or paused it. My voice was razor edge. Ended. She squeezed her teacup as if she needed something to hold on to. "Mike, I know you have every reason to hate me, but I need you to know I'm not asking you to take me back out of pity. I truly want to fix what we can. If you want to walk away, I won't stop you. I wanted to see you, to see if there's any part of you that still wants me." I stared at her for a long, silent moment. I could practically hear the ticking of a clock on the wall behind the counter. My mind swirled with conflicting emotions. The memory of her betrayal, the love that once was, the lonely nights spent imagining her with him, the soul-crushing emptiness I'd felt since I left. Finally, I spoke. "I don't know if I want you anymore, I began, then shook my head. Saying her name felt foreign. Part of me wants to wipe you from my life and never look back. Another part can't forget that you were my wife for all those years." She closed her eyes. "I know. You wanted me to talk. Fine. Here it is." I leaned in, voice low. "You killed something inside me. I used to believe in our future. Now all I believe in is that I can't trust you." She swallowed hard, tears glistening. "I deserve that." A bitter laugh escaped me. Deserve. Funny word. "You deserve to feel like I feel, to go to bed each night thinking of me in someone else's arms, to see it in your mind's eye until you can't breathe." My throat tightened. "But revenge is worthless. It won't change what happened." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. In that moment, I saw the woman I had once loved, vulnerable, flawed, and maybe genuinely sorry. And that cut me even deeper. I looked away, unable to stand the sight of her tears. "So, what do we do?" she whispered. "Do we sign divorce papers and go our separate ways?" I clenched my jaw. The weight of the question loomed. Maybe that was the logical path. Maybe we'd both be better off freeing each other from this pain. But something inside me rebelled. An old memory of holding her close, a flicker of the dreams we once built. I hated how complicated my feelings were. "I don't know," I said. "I truly don't." She wiped her eyes. "Can we at least keep talking? Or maybe try counseling, if you think it's worth it?" I felt exhaustion wash over me. "I can't give you an answer right now. Maybe I'll call you if I decide it's worth a shot. But for now, just let me be." She nodded, biting her lip, fresh tears threatening to fall. Without waiting for her to say more, I stood, turned, and walked out. My emotions were in a tangled knot. All I knew was that I wasn't ready to forgive, nor was I ready to fully let go. I was stuck in that gray zone, alone, uncertain of my next step. Days turned into weeks. I focused on my business, building it bigger and stronger. Clients rolled in. Deals closed. My name started to get recognized in certain circles. And through it all, the memory of her betrayal burned inside me, fueling the determination to succeed in spite of everything. I found myself working late into the night, living off adrenaline and caffeine, ignoring the stabs of loneliness that haunted me when I tried to sleep. She reached out occasionally, sending texts or voicemails, apologizing, asking if we could meet. I kept ignoring her or giving curt replies. The distance became my shield, and ironically, success tasted sweeter the further I got from her. I started investing in projects outside my main field, taking risks I wouldn't have dared before. My bank account soared, yet every night, I returned to an empty apartment that felt like a hollow victory. Eventually, the legal side caught up with me. I consulted a lawyer. We prepared separation agreements, dividing assets. I made sure she'd be financially stable, but not at the level she'd grown accustomed to. I kept the upper hand. Oddly enough, that petty sense of winning was the only solace I had left. If she was going to cheat, I'd leave her with less than she expected, but not in a way that would brand me as vindictive. Just enough to remind her she no longer had my heart or my money. One afternoon, out of the blue, she showed up at my office. My secretary buzzed me, sounding nervous. "Sir, there's a woman here to see you. She says it's urgent. She won't leave." I nearly told her to throw my wife out, but curiosity got the better of me. "Fine," I grumbled. "Let her in." Moments later, she walked in, looking thinner, her eyes ringed with dark circles. She wore a simple blouse and jeans, a far cry from the polished outfits she used to wear. She stopped a few feet from my desk, arms clasped in front of her, eyes downcast. "Mike," she began softly. I need to say goodbye." I raised an eyebrow, leaning back in my chair. "Goodbye." She nodded, tears pooling. "I'm going to Denver to stay with my parents for a while. I can't keep floating here, hoping you'll forgive me. I know you need your space, and maybe we'll never be together again. But I wanted you to know. I'm sorry. I'm leaving so you can have the freedom you deserve." I let the silence settle. Her words should have made me feel vindicated. Instead, I felt a twisted pang in my chest. I studied her face, remembering the day I proposed to her, how her eyes had lit up with such genuine joy. Now they were dull, haunted by her own choices. "Do what you have to do," I said evenly. "I won't stop you." She mustered a tiny nod. "I just hope you find peace." I stood, walked around the desk, and stopped a foot away from her. The tension hung in the air. I resisted the urge to reach out and touch her hair, to hold her the way I used to. Instead, I just stared, letting her see the emptiness in my gaze. Finally, I said, "I already did, when I realized you have no value to me anymore." She sucked in a sharp breath, tears slipping down her cheeks. I knew my words were cruel. A part of me wanted them to be, because I couldn't let her leave with any illusions that I might be the broken man waiting for her return. She bowed her head, whispered, "I'm sorry," and turned to go. Her shoulders shook. I watched her leave, heard the door shut behind her. And in that moment I felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Triumph, pain, relief, and a stab of regret. I sat back down at my desk, heart pounding. My eyes flicked to a photo on the shelf, our wedding day. I stood there in the photo, beaming, while she leaned into my side, laughter in her eyes. I felt a pang of nostalgia for who we'd been. But it was overshadowed by the cold satisfaction that we weren't those people anymore. She had no hold on me now. Months passed. My business soared. I made connections with major investors, saw my name appear in entrepreneurial circles. The city felt like my territory, my victory lap. Occasionally, I heard news about her from mutual friends. She was living quietly in Denver, working a small job in interior design. I wondered if Tony was still a part of her life, but the rumor was that he'd moved on, chasing new flings. And that was fine by me. One morning, I woke up in my new luxury apartment. The sun filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. I stretched, feeling the crisp sheets around me. A phone buzzed on the nightstand, my phone this time. A text from a business partner, congratulating me on landing another lucrative contract. I smirked, feeling that familiar spark of pride. This was the life she once said she wanted. Success, comfort, recognition. Now I had it, and she was nowhere to be found. I got dressed in a tailored suit, stepped into a pair of polished shoes, and headed downstairs to the waiting car service. On the drive to the office, I stared out at the palm trees swaying under the California sun. My mind flicked briefly to her, to the day I confronted her about the texts, the day I told her if she valued her life, she'd accept what was coming. And she had. She lost me, lost the security of our marriage. I'd become everything she once dreamed I'd be, and she was gone. A curious sense of calm washed over me. At last, I felt that the pain had turned into something else, a hardened acceptance. Time hadn't healed me. It had only blurred the edges of my memories. In the end, maybe I'd come to prefer it that way, like a scar that doesn't quite fade, but no longer throbs with fresh agony. I realized then that I was finally free. Free of the anger, free of the illusions. When I arrived at my office, my assistant greeted me with a smile, rattling off my schedule for the day. I nodded, letting my mind shift into work mode. Something about the busy hum of the place felt like home now. I was the captain of my own ship, no longer weighed down by the anchor of betrayal. Before stepping into my morning meeting, I took one last look at my phone. A single old photo of us remained in my gallery, the two of us laughing on a beach in better times. I paused, felt a faint stirring of sorrow in my chest. Then I exhaled, tapped delete, and let it slip into digital oblivion. It was time to truly close the door on that chapter. There was no grand sense of relief, just the final acceptance that everything I once valued had changed, maybe for good. And so, with each step down the gleaming hallway, I let that old life fade behind me. That final pang of regret echoed for a moment, then went quiet. If she ever thought her laughter would keep me tethered, she was wrong. The only sound I heard now was the click of my shoes on polished tile, each one taking me further away from the coffin of our marriage and deeper into the life I had claimed as my own. I'd won, but not through a gloating triumph. I'd won because she no longer mattered. And that, I realized as I pushed open the door to the conference room, was the most fitting revenge of all.